Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion, learn the truth behind the alcohol myths, and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. Well, hey, everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And as promised, this is part 2 of Does Your Midlife Need a Makeover? So I want to talk a little bit today about a midlife awakening. And we talked last week about some of the transitions that we go through, where alcohol shows up, what we might be facing as we go through transitions, and how our attitude and our thoughts around aging have really been shaped by our culture. And we can push back against that. We absolutely can change the way that we show up, the thoughts we have around aging, and really embracing, as I mentioned, the Japanese culture does, the wisdom and the beauty in growing in our experience and really finding our voice. Sometimes I think part of my own midlife awakening has been permission, allowing myself permission to say more of what I believe, ask for what I need, share more, and really just believe in myself more. I think there's this beautiful transition that happens on the other side of drinking where we really have our own back, where we start to realize that when we can say no to alcohol and we start to rediscover who we are and maybe create who we want to become, we really do have our own back. And I think that is a beautiful part of aging. And whether you have been not drinking, you're still sort of caught in the midst of it, I wanted to share just a few more things that I have been paying attention to as I have my own midlife awakening. So there's this beautiful idea of transition intelligence. So we think about EQ, emotional intelligence, IQ, intellectual intelligence, PQ, positive intelligence, and this new phrase of TQ, transition intelligence. And I think it's so powerful because it just is a beautiful way of reminding us that these transitions are going to come at us and we can meet them, move toward them with curiosity and awareness, or we can resist them. But either way, we are going to have these transitions. And one that I didn't really talk about last week was the menopause and the andropause. So, menopause, we know for women, often starts late 40s to mid 50s. For men, andropause is much less dramatic, but it also is a hormonal change that can really affect us in midlife. And so we used to consider this, this midlife crises, but now we can really think about these beautiful transitions. And one of the things I want to just share around menopause, that when I was in nutrition school, we talked about menopause as this place of where our adrenal function has to take over from our sex hormones. And we're often not prepared for that. And I think one of the most beautiful things about meeting a midlife and embracing even midlife is the idea that we could start to prepare now for this transition of menopause. In our American culture, certainly, we tend to think of menopause as something to suffer through, make a lot of jokes about, women being witchy and, oh my gosh, the hot flashes, the night sweats. And I want to just offer that may be a part of your journey, but it's not a foregone conclusion. There are so many things we can do to intercept that experience. And I want to invite you to explore what it looks like to start to pay attention to your lifestyle so that your adrenals are in a healthier shape so that you can meet
this time of menopause with more resources. So, definitely thinking about lifestyle in terms of diet, gut health, movement, sleep. When we think about our adrenals taking over, our adrenals are often tapped out or close to tapped out because they are we are in this heightened state of this nervous system dysregulation, constantly in fight or flight, or we are spiking our blood sugar and our adrenals have to show up to help balance blood sugar. So, right there are two things we can start to pay attention to. And so, I just want to invite you to imagine that. What if you could change the way you experience menopause? And certainly, alcohol plays a role in this. We know that alcohol in midlife is just like adding fuel to the fire. Every system in your body is impacted by drinking alcohol, even if it's just a glass of wine a week. So, I am not here to be the anti alcohol police, but I do want to shine a spotlight on the way that alcohol affects us as we go through midlife. And I think sometimes midlife, some of those transitions can mean changing in relationships, whether we maybe have a gray area divorce or we lose a partner early, or there's a scary health diagnosis and things shift. We can, as women in particular, we can start to feel really lonely. And so that loneliness sometimes can be such a huge factor in either continuing to drink or maybe even considering going back to drinking. And so I want to invite you again to consider what are the gifts and the options that are available to us at this time of life. And I think it's really important to think about this grief and gratitude. So, if you have followed my work at all or worked with me as an alcohol freedom coach, you might know that I do often talk about this area of grief when it comes to not drinking. And we often have this identity around drinking. I think I talked about this a little bit before, but we see ourselves as maybe someone who's no longer going to be fun. We're not going to fit in. If I'm not a drinker, who am I? And so we often can see this big shift in our identity when we give up alcohol. And I think it's really important and powerful to acknowledge that and perhaps to even have a little bit of grief around that. I bring this up because I think the same is true with most of these transitions we go through in midlife. So, if we are experiencing perhaps a scary health diagnosis, we can acknowledge it and we can do maybe a little bit of grieving around it and really, knowing that that's going to help us get to a place of acceptance. And then eventually, as I mentioned last time, loving what is. But we really have an opportunity to change that grief into gratitude as we move into awareness and acceptance. And so I think for all of these transitions, it's if you have given up alcohol, you've laid a little groundwork. You know kind of how it goes. You know that there is a period perhaps of grieving. You know there is a period of acceptance. You know there might be a period of wanting it to look different, wanting to resist, wanting to hide. All of that is okay. All emotions are welcome. And so we really have a beautiful opportunity here when it comes to midlife. One other thing I was going to mention is this idea of taking some time to transition, getting some resources. And I really love the idea of even having some sort of ritual around midlife. When I was a young mom and I had my third and last baby, I was really wanting to give him a first birthday party. But as we know, children at the age of 1 will not remember their birthday. And so I was kind of torn. And I knew he was my last baby. And so I really wanted to give him a birthday party, but I didn't know if it was frivolous. And then I spoke with my neighbor who had lived for a number of years as a young adult in Hawaii, on the big island of Hawaii. And she said, Terry, the Hawaiian people only celebrate two birthdays, the age of 1 and the age of 50. And I want to share that with you because I absolutely love that. Because if we have a birthday bash at 50, we really are using this ritual of honoring and acknowledging that transition into a place where we're becoming one of the wise elders, where we're transitioning into maybe this fourth act that I mentioned last time, and really having this beautiful opportunity to explore what is so powerful about turning 50. And so you can probably guess the end of the story is that my son did have a first birthday party. And I again think that rituals are really missing so often in our American culture. And I think it would be beautiful to have a ritual honoring around these midlife transitions, around menopause, around andropause, and really dropping the midlife crises and creating this beautiful evolution of life where we're moving through life in these stages that are beautiful and valuable. We don't stop learning and growing just because the calendar has turned another year. And I have found that as alcohol moved out of my life and I started embracing new opportunities, new awareness. I started using more curiosity to explore new things. I feel more alive, more vibrant, more connected than ever. And some of that was dropping some of the old stories that I'd carried around for years, trying new things, again, believing in myself, having my back. So I think that we are missing a great opportunity here to have some sort of ritual around this transition. I think it would be really powerful. Something else I was thinking about is when I was working with members of the Path, which is one of This Naked Mind's programs, we worked together for a year. So I would coach these large groups of men and women, mostly women, but men also, for an entire year, along with some other coaches. And I realized that this 1 year time frame is really special. A lot happens in a year, and particularly when we're moving through a deep change like letting go of alcohol. The first birthday, the first holiday season, the first summer season, all of these things can really throw us for a loop. And so moving through this year together with intention and awareness was really so key in helping people make a lasting change. And I often would talk about this beautiful time of a year where we carved out an entire year, and I likened it to a sabbatical or a gap year that, kids sometimes take between high school and college, and then a sabbatical. I don't know how popular that is anymore, but I remember, um, you know, 30 years ago, maybe it was more common to take like a 6 week sabbatical from work, and people would have this time to go do something very different outside of their norm. You didn't just do a staycation. I know people who bought a boat and sailed around the world, and people that rented an RV and traveled for 6 weeks. And I want to invite you to think about taking a gap year, taking an entire year to explore midlife and the transitions that are coming, the ones you've already been through. Perhaps there's some celebration and some acknowledgement of how far you've come and what might be ahead. And I think that for me, this idea of lifelong learning is so powerful. And I just love the idea of spending a year to explore midlife. So that might be something I offer in the future. It's just the seed, just the germination of an idea right now. But there's something really powerful about that 1 year experience in a group together. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned from other people also going through midlife. And so I'll keep you posted. The other thing I wanted to offer today is something that came from the book that Chip Conley just wrote, which is, I think it's 12 Ways to Learn to Love Midlife. Let's see, I'm going to look at the title right now. Learning to Love Midlife 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. Isn't that cool? So he actually has an exercise that I want to invite you to explore. And I'll share some of my answers in my newsletter this week, but it's really the daring dozen. So we think about the dirty dozen, right? Or we think about, 12 things, but the daring dozen, happier as I get older. What is creating more happiness as I get older? What are 12 of my own reasons that I am loving midlife? And if that seems like a tall order, start with one or two. Just start, asking yourself, where has life gotten richer, more beautiful, more open, more awareness, consciousness, more spiritual, more personal, deeper? I think there's so much beauty when we take a look at where we've been, where we are, and where we're headed. I love anticipation. I love having something to look forward to. I'm not much of a person who does a lot of melancholy or reminiscing. But if that's you, I think there are some beautiful takeaways of how we arrived exactly where we are. So I would love for you to consider doing your own daring dozen. I think it's a beautiful way to ask yourself, what do I want to create in my life? I think of this term curate a lot. And I think about, a curator of a museum. So, we bring in this new collection and we let go, we move out the old collection. And when we bring in that new collection, when a curator does, they set it up on display and they highlight it and there's spotlights and there's information. And it's meant to take you on a journey and heighten your senses. And this is what we can do with our life as we grow older and wiser. We really get to curate. We get to let go of the things that no longer serve us. And we get to explore, what do I want to pick up? What do I want to hold on to? What do I want to bring in that might be new? And I think, our culture again gives us these messages that we're too old for that. We don't do that in our later years. Something that was fascinating to me is when I look back at my grandmother, she was born in 1902. And when she was 60 years old, she was the quintessential 60-year-old stereotypical grandmother. She wore a wig, she wore orthopedic shoes, she wore cardigans, she had a car that she only drove to church on Sundays, and she really had a very small life. And my mother at 60, her life looked much, much different. I remember celebrating my mother's birthday at a vineyard in Napa. My parents lived in the Napa Valley. Her best friend was there. It was a surprise birthday. There was dancing and laughter and music and food. And she was nothing like my grandmother. And now, when I turned 60, it was right during the pandemic in 2020. But since then, at the age of 63, I have realized that my 60s, so often I feel like I'm just getting started. I went on vacation with my husband and our two best friends in October. And I usually do a little bit of work while I am on vacation. I don't like to suspend everything, meeting with clients, holding programs, offering the podcast. And so I cut back, I rearranged my schedule a bit, but I usually always have some work. And so my friend asked me, well, when are you going to retire? Because you're really still working. And I thought, why would I stop doing this, which brings me so much joy, passion, delights me, brings meaning to my life, hopefully connects me with people that inspire me and motivate me. And so I think that this idea of turning 60 or 70, it looks any way we want to have it look. And that is the beauty of being in this world in 2023. So much has changed. And we talked a little bit about last time about health span versus lifespan. And I really think that more than just health span, we want to pay attention to that, maybe that sabbatical where we look and we curate and we explore How is my spiritual life? How is my mental life? How is my physical life? How is my emotional life? Where are my connections? What's filling my cup each day? I think it's such a beautiful opportunity. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of this dip into midlife with me. I'm actually going to be traveling home when you listen to this, or I might already have just arrived home. So I'm recording this episode a little bit early. And, part of what I am doing by traveling to this place is honoring who I am becoming, still growing, still connecting, still having new experiences. And I invite you to do the same. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch up with you next week. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.